Welcome to the On a Mission Mojo podcast, where I have the pleasure of interviewing impact-driven founders, entrepreneurs, authors, and business experts who are actively working to create a positive difference in our world. I'm your host, Lori Young, a branding specialist, certified master marketer, and a passionate advocate for brands that possess heart, soul, and an unwavering commitment to drive change for humanity. It takes grit, a visionary mindset, and an abundance of mojo to navigate this journey. And the stories I share will undoubtedly ignite your passion. If you're seeking an infusion of inspiration, motivation, and valuable insights to amplify your impact, let's dive right in. Welcome to episode 32 of the On a Mission Mojo podcast. I am so excited today. I met our guest on LinkedIn about, maybe 4 to 6 months ago. And I ran into his content accidentally. The algorithm just showed it to me. And I fell in love with his content because there was a personal connection for me, which we can talk about a little bit later. But what we're going to be talking about today is ADHD. And if you think that you don't have ADHD and you're ready to tune out, I encourage you to continue to listen, because I think today, with all of the just digital interactions and us constantly being on digital devices, that I feel like a lot of us are developing ADHD symptoms. And I just think that this conversation is going to be very enlightening. And if you have ADHD, you're definitely going to want to stay to the end and hear what we have to talk about today. So let me introduce our guest, ADHD coach Nick. I will not even attempt to pronounce his last name. Helps young adults harness their ADHD to reach their full potential in the workplace. Through personalized coaching, he provides specific tools, strategies, and clarity to enhance productivity, improve organizational skills, and excel as top performers without experiencing burnout, helping individuals manage their symptoms and overcome their challenges.
Wow.
So welcome, Nick, to the show today. Again, like I said, I'm very excited. Nick has become just a real fast friend of mine. We've met before, and we talk a lot through the LinkedIn DMs, and I love Nick, and so I think you guys are going to love him too. So why don't we start, Nick, just sharing with listeners like a little bit about what you feel your mission is in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, what a wonderful introduction, Lori. Good stuff on that. And yeah, Lori is like one of my best friends here on LinkedIn, as well as I wish to meet you in real life too soon. So my mission is basically, I just want to help people embrace their ADHD, but also just harness their ADHD where they're working in the workplace, because I was somebody who was unaware that had ADHD and I was underperforming at my job. And because I was underperforming, it basically led me to eventually getting fired from my job. And it was a huge blow in the gut, and it really just tarnished my self-esteem. It just caused me to have depression and anxiety. I ended up having to go to therapy, and I just didn't have the tools. I didn't have the support system that I had before. So I really had to like pick myself up to figure out what was going on with me. And eventually I discovered I had ADHD. Now, when I first discovered, the whole world went into spiral because I had no idea what to do with it. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm broken. I'm never going to be the same ever again. Now this is going to be like a disability for me.
Sure.
And I ended up, for the most part, just picking myself up again and just say to myself, like, well, if this is how I'm brought up, maybe I have to do my best to do something about this to make my life a little better.
Sure.
And so I did whatever I could to learn about ADHD by reading articles, by reading books, by listening to podcasts, just scouring all over to just understand ADHD and what it is about. And I discovered that, yes, ADHD is indeed a superpower. It
Hmm.
does have its setbacks, but it's up to you on how you perceive it and how you manage it. Because if
Right.
you just let it, bring you down, of course, ADHD is going to be a setback and a challenge. We all
Yeah.
have different superpowers. We just have to know how to use it.
Absolutely. I really resonate with when you say, ADHD is also a superpower. I have a son with ADHD, and you know this, and he is like a creative genius. Like
Yes.
musically, like, oh my gosh, like he is a DJ and he's just so creative. He's a superpower in sales. Like he just kills it in sales. He uses
Hmm.
that drive and that competitiveness to, to drive his success. So there is, and I've talked to another business owner that has ADHD. And, when I was talking to her, she was kind of like all over the place. She was standing up, she's moving, she, dominated the conversation, but she is killing it in business.
Yes.
So it is not, yes, like you said, it has its setbacks, it has its challenges, but it also has its superpowers. So take me back just a little bit to your story. You said that you got fired from your job, and this is kind of when you realized something was going on. What was showing up in the workplace for you that one got you fired, and two, kind of what were those symptoms that you were like dealing with that made you realize, maybe something's going on?
Yeah, so there was a couple things I'll try to remember in the top of my head for each and
Hmm.
every single symptom that I faced, but I did face a lot of symptoms while I was there. So, for example, sometimes I would come late to work,
Hmm.
sometimes I would miss meetings, I would miss very specific details. And by the way, just to just go back a little bit. Uh, I
Hmm.
was I was a graphic designer. I was working at a creative agency, and so when it
Okay.
comes to being a designer, you have to be meticulous. You have to make sure you have the attention to detail,
Hmm.
right? So I had the creative superpower. But
Hmm.
my setback was my attention to detail.
Got it.
So that was something that was kind of clashing when I was doing my work. But that was one of the challenges that I faced. Another thing also is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is RSD.
Hmm.
70% of people have this with ADHD. And what tends to happen is that if your boss or somebody that you look up to doesn't acknowledge you or gives you harsh feedback, you
Mm.
don't take it very well. You just shut down. And I can't count how many times I shut down every time that happened.
Mm.
Um, I faced burnout. I didn't take breaks.
Hmm.
I had sleepless nights where I stayed home and worked on projects very late at night and getting no sleep whatsoever. I barely had time to hang out with loved ones or friends. And that also led me to basically underperform because of it. So these
Right.
were just some of the, manifestations of ADHD at the time. Like I didn't know that it was ADHD. I just thought, oh, I'm just dumb. Or just like I
Oh,
was lazy, or I
right.
was just, I was like really beating myself out up. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't talk about this too, is that when you have ADHD, you have an inner bully 24/7.
Ah, that breaks my heart because that means that's what's going on with. I mean, I have an inner bully practically 24/7. So
Yeah,
maybe I
but
do have ADHD. I definitely know my son has it. But it breaks my heart to hear that, that he's probably, and I know he's a perfectionist. I know that he is hard on himself, but like, say more about that.
yeah, so what I like to call it is your inner supervillain. So we all have supervillains, right? Like in every comic book, and sometimes we don't want to turn into a supervillain. We want to turn into our own superhero. So,
Hmm.
for example, the supervillain is always going to tell you like, "Oh, you're not good enough. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not performing well. Your business sucks. Blah 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 blah." Or all these
Right.
things are just going to try to minimize you and bring you down, and eventually you're going to be your own worst enemy. So
Mhm.
what I try to do with my coaching is I try to help you embrace your ADHD, so that way it doesn't turn you into your worst enemy, but more so as your own superhero. So you create your own superhero character. So for
Got it.
me, so Lori, you mentioned your son enjoys making music. He's very creative in sales, right? Like
Mhm.
he's just an overall creative individual.
Yes.
I'm actually the same too. I used to be a musician, like a full-time musician. I was a
Oh, okay.
musician for, since I was 16 years old. I play guitar and bass. I've been in a lot of rock bands. Um,
Cool.
I made songs, and that's
Uh-huh.
my creative superpower, just being super creative.
Mhm.
And when I got my sales job recently, I've been working there now for almost 3 months. People at my job, like my bosses and my managers, they're telling me, like, Nick, you're killing it with sales. You're killing it, killing it, killing it. And that's the type of result that I'm trying to also give to others so that they can
Mhm.
excel at their job, so that they can be like, oh, I'm killing it, like I'm doing it. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I guess one of the things I'm curious about is if you kind of go back to when you were a young boy, what was it like? What do you remember? Like, because it's funny how like you discover something in your adulthood, right? And then you start going back into your childhood and going, okay, that makes sense. Like that makes sense. Now I understand this.
Yeah.
Help me understand little Nick and
Oh,
what it was like growing up with him.
well, little Nick was a troublemaker. He
Okay.
used to, what he would do was he had a lot of hyperactiveness. I mean,
Hmm.
I was just a burst of energy.
Sure. Hmm.
I always loved to run around. I always loved to go biking in the mountains in Greece. So I was living in Greece at the time. So there was a lot of like stuff that you can do to like, I guess you could say like be hyper. And when I was in school, like I just had a hard time learning. I just couldn't sit still
Mm.
for like 1 minute. And I was trying to learn the Greek alphabet, and I was actually trying to cheat off of somebody to actually learn the Greek alphabet. I was a
Okay.
really, really bad kid. There's actually a story where um, and this is where the competitiveness of ADHD comes in, where
Mhm,
when I was playing tag with all the little kids, of course,
mhm.
like you're not supposed to like hit them or do all these bad things to them. But what I would used to do to not get caught or to catch me, I would trip the kids who try to catch me because I was so competitive. I was so bad, Lori. I was so bad. I was such a bad kid. I even stole like toys at in the classroom and bring it home because that's what like brought me like the dopamine.
No, that's that impulsivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like, "Oh, I have to have that toy. Let's just take it," right?
I'm a risk taker. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
risk taker.
Mhm.
And that's part of like, so that's like part of like the pros and cons of like ADHD. It's like, yes, you are a risk taker, you're impulsive, but sometimes your impulsivity can lead you to bad places if you're not careful. So I like to
Sure.
make smart impulsive decisions rather um the other way around. Let's just put
Right.
it that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, so yeah, it reminds me kind of the same of what I went through as a mom, and I just remember working really hard, with my child to keep him on track. Like
Yeah,
we would have like I remember creating like these little uh like little checklist for the morning because getting him off to school in the morning was so challenging.
I
So
bet.
I would create these little checklists of like, make your bed, get dressed, brush your teeth, do this, right? And I would put it like at the breakfast table for him. And I
Mm,
would have him like just checking off, like as he did each thing, checking off each thing to kind of just keep him focused. And
yeah.
I feel like it really helped him.
Yeah.
It was a challenge, but I do feel like just little things like that helped him start to kind of develop the skills to kind of sit and focus and create some structure in his life that just helped him get things done.
Yeah. Absolutely. Unfortunately for me, my parents were very loosey goosey about it. Like they
Hmm.
didn't set systems for me, or they
Well,
didn't,
they probably didn't understand.
well, they just weren't ready to be parents. Let's just be real, you know.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so they just weren't ready to be parents. I mean, my mom was like 16, 17 years old when she had me. My dad was, I think, like very young, like 23, 24 years old.
Hmm.
So they didn't know anything about raising a child. So really my grandparents were raising me most of the time, and what really motivated me to get out of bed was a sugar donut or ice cream.
Okay. So that was your breakfast in the morning?
Yeah, no, I just remember my grandfather coming into my house and waving a sugar donut in my face, and that's what got me up. It's insane, but you know what? Now I have the sweet tooth, and now I'm working on not,
Not having a sweet
eating.
tooth?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I have a sweet tooth myself. Like every day after lunch, I have to have like a dark chocolate peanut butter cup. It's just like
Oh.
I need to have like that little sweet like after my lunch. So I
Mhm.
get the sweet tooth.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to talk about, because sometimes I think that this can be a misconception. I was talking to like a family member who was they were talking about his child, and his child is struggling, and he's like, I know I have ADHD, but he doesn't have ADHD. He can focus. When you have
Mhm.
ADHD, you can't focus at all. And I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know that that's true. I said, oh, absolutely, it's true. If you have ADHD, you can't focus on anything. And I was like,
Eh.
I don't know about it. Let's talk about that. Of
Sure.
like, because one of the things I've heard you talking about is this kind of like concept of like hyper focus or hyper fixation.
Yes.
Um, so let's talk about like when it comes to focus, what is it really like when you have ADHD?
Well, we're really easily distracted and
Hmm.
prone to like just like not being motivated to do mundane tasks or boring tasks. Like we really need to find ways to make things fun and urgent, right?
Hmm.
And the thing is, we only want to hyper focus on the thing that we are really interested in.
Right. Yeah.
So for example, for me, I could sit playing a guitar for 6 to 8 hours and not realize the sun went down.
Mm. Hmm.
I can sit for 6 to 8 hours playing video games,
Right.
and like I would just time blindness would come into the mix. So that's another thing too that we can talk about, like time blindness and how that's
Okay.
affecting like work and productivity. But for the most part, like we need to find ways to do the boring tasks, because for some people, like cleaning the house or having the house immaculate is their hyper focus. It's
Hmm.
the thing that like brings them happiness and joy, right? Or it could be
Sure.
translated differently. So everybody focuses differently, and when it comes to ADHD, we just want to hyper focus on the things that bring us happiness and gives us that dopamine that we need.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So let's talk about when you have to focus on things, because we all face this. We have to
Hmm.
focus on things that we don't want to do, or that are mundane or boring. What are some of the tips that you can share with us on increasing our focus and getting ourselves to kind of focus on those things that we don't like so much?
Yeah, so there's this framework that I developed called the RISE framework. It's about how to motivate yourself with mundane tasks. So
Hmm.
the RISE framework is race, inspire, strive, engage.
Okay.
So sometimes you have to give a task a sense of urgency. That's race. Inspire
Hmm.
is to add novelty and your creativity to your tasks. And strive is to basically push yourself to achieve and complete the task. And
Hmm.
engage is find ways to engage and captivate yourself. So having that sort of framework can really like it could work one or the other. So maybe you're the kind of person that in order to be engaged, you have to create a sense of novelty to the task. So for example, if you're washing the dishes, you
Hmm.
have to find ways to make it more interesting, right? So what's one way you can make it interesting and fun? Well, maybe you can wash dishes based on the color, right? Or maybe you want to wash the utensils first and work your way up. So you could do the
Okay.
same thing but with tasks as well. So maybe you just want to do the presentation that's the most fun to put together, and then kind of work backwards, or whichever is works for you, and whatever um, motivates you to want to do that task, right? Or maybe you just want to race against yourself. Maybe you just want to race against time, and maybe you want
Mm,
to take like 30 minutes to complete 1 page or maybe 5 pages of a presentation or something.
okay. Okay. So yeah. And I think adding novelty can be like music. Like I remember talking to my other son, and he would I don't know that he's ever been diagnosed with ADHD, but he, would be in college and going, "Oh my God, I can't do my homework. Like this is so boring. I hate this class, blah, blah, blah." And I'm just like, okay, put on your favorite music. Like,
Yep.
figure out, like, start for 15 minutes, just work for 15 minutes, just start writing your paper for 15 minutes. And that's
Yeah.
it. And then, because once I know, for me, it's like once I get started on something, it kind of creates like that snowball effect. It's like,
Yes.
okay, the action kind of breeds more action.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other ways you can motivate yourself. Like maybe you need to get your favorite bagel in the morning before you get started on your work, or maybe you need to listen to your favorite song, like something to just jumpstart you, or just taking like 2 to 5 minutes to just do whatever you can now, and then just like kind of snowball your way in, like you mentioned. Like that's a
Hmm.
sense of novelty. That's part of like that framework for the most part.
Sure. I know another thing that I've done for me is like, okay, if I get this done, like, okay, I'm just going to use emptying the dishwasher, which I absolutely hate, but it's one of my chores.
Of
It's
course.
like,
It's not fun.
no, it's like, okay, when I get done emptying the dishwasher, I get to eat my chocolate candy. And
Yeah,
I will literally like deprive myself, like, no, you cannot eat that chocolate candy until you empty the dishwasher. So
mhm.
it's like kind of giving yourself a reward that you can look forward to once you complete that task.
Yeah, you're inspiring yourself like, "Oh, okay, like if I finish this task, I will reward myself in the end of it." So it's kind of like giving yourself a reward. And that's another thing that I think is really important for people with ADHD, is that we don't often reward ourselves, or we don't give each other ourselves breaks in
Hmm.
between those working sessions and hours, because you don't want to constantly work like a lot, because then you're just going to end up not wanting to do it, and it's just going to feel unmotivating for you. Another thing that I also talk about with like some of my clients is that having a workstation that you can love going to, like for example, like I have like my whole desk set up,
Hmm.
and I have it personalized for me,
Right.
right? So some people, like, they work from home or they work at an office, and one thing I tell them is personalize your workspace, because it
Okay.
actually increases motivation and productivity, because it feels like you. The only thing you have to do is just to make sure to manage it over time. Like take 5 to 15 minutes to pick up things every week to like clean up your desk. But
Mm.
this actually teaches you organizational skills. And that's another thing that people with ADHD struggle, is the organization and messiness. So,
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I've seen that. I'm a kind of person that, like, if my desk is messy and cluttered, I literally cannot think. Like
mhm,
it's the clutter on the physical clutter, like clutters my,
yes, absolutely,
yeah. So
absolutely.
tell me, I guess a little bit, talk talk me through like what it's like to work with someone who has ADHD. For someone on the outside, like what can they do to kind of better um work with someone who has ADHD? Like what are some of the ways that like you can kind of partner and make it a more fruitful relationship?
Well, I always tell people that if you get along with somebody like easily, it's usually because they also have ADHD too.
Okay. Oh, I must have ADHD because I get along well with you. I get it.
Well, it's weird because like I would have a conversation with somebody, and then they would tell me it's like, "Oh, I have ADHD." I was like, "Oh, no wonder we get along, because we could easily I guess you could say, captivate each other and just, have a full-blown conversation without getting bored because we do get easily bored. And I
Mhm.
feel like with ADHD coaches, I feel like if you work with somebody that's an ADHD coach who not only understands your challenges and understands your struggles,
Right.
you can be more empathetic towards those struggles. Like I have a client who has the same problem going on. Like she actually like quit her job because she was working in an environment that she was underperforming, or that's what the bosses said that they were telling her.
Mhm.
And she was constantly like beating herself up, like,
Mhm.
like, oh, like I know I can do it. It's just like he just keeps telling me like I have potential. That's like something that they keep telling you. It's like, oh, you have potential, but like you're not doing enough.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I also got in the workplace too, where my boss would tell me like, Nick, you're so creative, you're so talented, but like you're not putting in the work. What's going on?
Yeah, that's hard to hear. It's discouraging.
Yeah. So I feel like I can totally relate to those people with challenges, and even just like people that I work with. Like there are people that say they got diagnosed with ADD, which ADD is ADHD. It's just renamed. That's
Mhm.
really what it is. And
Isn't
like
ADD though different from ADHD, and the ADHD has the hyperactivity component?
No, what happened was they started off with ADD in the 1920s or 30s. That's how they
Okay.
started it off, but then they added the hyperactive name component into it. So now it's ADHD. So they introduced that in I think somewhere in the 1980s.
Okay.
And ever since then, that's has been the diagnosis because that's a better way to diagnose someone because there's different manifestations of ADHD, right? So when I meet people or talk to people, they manifest their ADHD differently, and you kind
Mhm.
of know how to work with their ADHD based on how they manifest it.
Okay. Okay. So how, like, tell me more about that. Like, how, what do you mean by like how they manifest it?
So some people are more hyperactive, meaning
Okay.
they will manifest it externally, their
Okay.
ADHD, and some people will manifest their ADHD internally. So
Okay.
that's where the hyperactive and inattention part comes in. And if you're a kid who has one of the two, you probably will most likely have the combined symptoms if not treated correctly. So
Mhm.
if you treat it at like a very early stage, it's more manageable. But if you have it at a way more later stage in life, it's actually going to take a lot to like figure out like all these like challenges.
Right.
So, and you get to have those combined symptoms, which can be very difficult for some people.
Okay. I know that, you were talking about like bosses saying, you're so creative, you got so much potential,
Yeah.
but, right? There's always that but.
Yes.
Let's talk to the bosses out there, the managers out there that have ADHD staff or people on their team that have ADHD.
Hmm.
I want to help them give these people the best kind of tools to be successful. What are like just some great tips that you could share with bosses who have ADHD team members, but genuinely care about helping the be successful in the workplace? What can they do to support them?
Just listen to them. They
Okay.
just want to be heard. They just want to be acknowledged. They just want to be recognized for their talents
Mm-hmm.
because we work our asses off. Excuse
Sure.
my French, but
Mm-hmm.
we really work our ass off when it comes to the work we do. We put a lot of passion into our
Mm-hmm.
work. We
Right.
put a lot of creative energy for the work that we do. And the only thing we really need to for leaders to really recognize is our talents.
Mm-hmm.
So just the other day, believe it or not, Lori, my bosses and my manager told me, Nick, you're killing it. You're doing such a great job. And those are things that like keep motivating me to want to
Mm.
help them succeed and do well. And
Right.
mind you, I told my bosses about my ADHD. They know I
Okay.
have challenges and
Okay.
hiccups and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So having a community, like having a discussion with your boss in a meaningful way and letting them know like, hey, it's very hard for me to multitask. like I can't do multiple things at once. Or
Hmm.
sometimes like I need help with setting realistic expectations, because for us ADHDers, we don't know how to set realistic expectations and deadlines. Because for me, in my head, it might take 2 hours, but the project that's due on Friday um, is actually need to take 2 to 3 days to complete. And then I
Mm,
wait for the last minute and I'm like,
right.
oh, I shoot myself in the foot. So having that conversation, being empathetic with those with ADHD, and just talking about their challenges and how you can help them, and just be a support system, is super, super, super crucial to success, I
Yeah.
believe.
I like the way that you are courageous about being able to own your ADHD with confidence and tell people, "Hey, I have these challenges. This is how you can support me."
Yep.
Because I think most of the time when we see ourselves as having, like, a perceived disability, it
Hmm.
becomes harder to talk about, right? And we become kind of like ashamed of this perceived disability, and we
Yes.
become afraid of judgment.
Yeah.
I was talking to another person the other day, and I have another son who's on the autism spectrum, very high functioning, and
Yeah.
he can get very overwhelmed, like if you throw like too much on him.
Yeah.
And this person was saying, "Oh, well, he should go to the HR department and tell them, this is how you work best. I need to have, just a few amount of tasks, given to me at one time." And I was kind of like, "Ooh, like, how would HR like actually respond to that? How would a manager really respond to that?" Because I don't, at least right now, I don't believe that there are a ton of managers out there that are willing to embrace and truly work with people that are neurodiverse.
I agree.
And I hate to say this, but there are probably more neurodiverse people in this world than neurotypical.
Yeah, and I feel like the neurodiverse people can really bring a lot to the table as far as innovation, because remember,
Mhm.
people with ADHD were very creative. We're very
Yes.
resilient. We're very hardworking. We have a lot of energy to bring to the table. We can hyper focus for a long period of time. And so I feel like if the leaders can bring an inclusive environment where they feel welcomed and understood, and they can empathize with them, they will hyper focus on your business.
Yeah. My spouse, she's not, diagnosed with ADHD, but she's pretty much saying, yeah, I probably have ADHD. And one of the
Hmm.
things that you mentioned came up for her just in the last couple of days, where her boss was like, you know, "You need to do this and you need to do that. And why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that?"
Hmm.
And she had that immediate kind of like rejection sensitivity.
Yep.
And immediately she's just like, "Wait a minute. What happened to the fact that I'm number one in the country?" Right? Like, I have built this, I have built my region to be number one in the country. I brought it from the bottom to the top.
Yep.
And it's like, that's the superpower. Like, she's so good.
Yeah.
And when she gets that rejection, and you should be doing this and you should be doing that, it demotivates her. It sends her like down a spiral of like,
Yeah.
so it's challenging, definitely.
Yeah, there's definitely like dark sides to ADHD too, because of course there's always a light and dark side. That's why I talk about the inner villain and the superhero that you need to unlock and fully
Mm,
embrace, right? And now I'm not saying like, you have to be super positive and just say like ADHD is a superpower and like everything's hunky dory. Like no, it's just embracing your identity and just embracing your strengths and what you're really good at, right? So, for example, if your spouse really brought a lot to the table and they're not like honoring that, then of course, like it's she's gonna feel rejected and she's gonna
sure.
shut down.
Hmm.
right? And then she's going to question everything. It's like, oh, am I doing enough? Am I bringing enough to the table? And that's really problematic to have, because like I said, I truly think that if we can just like try to be more positive, be more mindful about how we think about ourselves, right? Like
Hmm.
that's sort of the things that I kind of focus on, because it's not only just the hyperactive and the intention of ADHD, it's also the emotion that comes into it as well. And I try
Right.
to focus on the emotional part, because your emotions can really play a huge factor as to worsening those symptoms
Hmm. Hmm.
outside of your
Right.
ADHD.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things that we had talked about earlier in our other conversation that I want to just talk about today.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily related to the workplace, although it probably can be translated, because most everybody, yes, we have our work life, but we also have our home life.
Yes,
And
yes.
one of the things that we were talking about, is how to be in relationship at home with someone who has ADHD. I was just talking to my son last night, actually, and it was funny because he said, "Oh, I have to change this light bulb. If Carrie doesn't have one chore for me on my list, then something's wrong." And I could tell he was just like annoyed with chores, right?
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Like chores and ADHD just doesn't go very well. It's like a puzzle piece that just, I mean, it can't be done, but it takes a lot of work and time for us to, and like I said, it takes motivation for us to do something that we don't like to do.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Any tips you can share for the spouses of the ADHD, or the partners of the person who has ADHD? How can they best work with someone who has ADHD and create a successful relationship?
So I truly believe that if you're someone that has ADHD and is aware of their ADHD and is aware of the challenges that you have with your
Hmm.
ADHD, teaching your partner about these challenges is a huge, huge, huge step,
Hmm.
because your partner has to work with you, not against you.
Right.
I would say like majority of people with ADHD, ADHD wants to be felt, accepted, understood. And like I said before, with when it comes to like employers, right? Like empathizing with people with ADHD and just have a better understanding. The same thing can be said for spouses or people in relationships. We just want to be understood, because like I said, we can really beat ourselves up,
Hmm.
and sometimes like when we don't do something for our significant other, if our significant other is not happy, then we get easily irritated, we just get
Mm.
upset really easily, and it just makes it very hard for the relationship for the most part. And
Yeah.
a lot of people say, um especially like in articles, they say that dating somebody with ADHD is very difficult, and I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree. As someone who has a neurotypical partner and I have
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, and I know I can be difficult, but hey, I'm always, trying to bring fun into the relationship somehow.
That's true. That's one thing I can say. ADHD people are fun. Um, I have one kind of final question before we close. And
Of
one
course.
of the things that you mentioned in the bio was avoiding burnout.
Yes.
Help listeners understand what are some things that they can do if they're experiencing ADHD, if they have ADHD, to avoid burnout.
Well, first, you have to be aware of your symptoms and your challenges.
Hmm.
You also have to be aware of how many things you're doing all at once. Because
Okay.
if you're doing like multiple tasks all at once, if you're working late hours, if you're somebody that's like not taking care of themselves mentally and physically, you're gonna be more prone to burnout versus somebody that's like neurotypical, because for us, like sometimes we just don't realize that we're not taking care of ourselves. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to be aware to knowing when to stop,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't stop and you don't take breaks, if you don't do things that make you happy, like for me, it's playing guitar,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or going for walks or going to my favorite bagel shop, or
Mm-hmm.
finding those things that bring you happiness, like doing those rituals, having a routine, when like a structure, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it takes a lot of practice. And the more
Right.
you practice self-care, the more you practice mindfulness, the more you practice turning those positive, I mean, no, those negative thoughts and reframe it into positive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
The more you do that, the better you can combat that inner supervillain, so that supervillain doesn't burn you out in the end. Because that's the whole purpose of a supervillain, is to burn you out and make you the worst
Mm,
version of
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. We don't like super villains.
Exactly, exactly. Like you don't want to turn into Darth Vader, you want to turn into Luke Skywalker.
There you go. Spoken from a true Star Wars nerd, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And I'm a huge Karate Kid fan too.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah,
Did you take martial arts?
no, but ever since I watched Cobra Kai, I was like, huh, maybe I should do martial arts. I think that would be really good for my ADHD to lower that hyperactivity.
Yeah. Yep. I put both of my boys in taekwondo.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm a black belt in taekwondo.
I saw the picture on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, Lori's such a badass.
Yeah, so I'm not anymore, but I was back when I was younger.
You still are, and you still are for what you do. I think you're a badass when it comes to business, Lori.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So it's been great. Like I think we've covered like a ton of ground. I hope that it was a fruitful conversation for listeners, whether you're a spouse of someone with ADHD, whether you have ADHD, whether you suspect that maybe you're raising a child with ADHD. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know it's very enlightening to me. I every time I talk to you, I learn something new about the ADHD mind and how you think and how you operate. And it helps me better understand the people around me.
It's very complex.
It is complex. It definitely is. There's lots of different things that I never thought were going on inside the mind of someone with ADHD. So thank you
Hmm.
for what you do and are struggling in the workplace and you have ADHD. You now have a coach that understands ADHD intimately and can actually help you embrace your ADHD and harness those superpowers so that you can be successful at work. Yeah. So let me just close with the same question I ask every single guest. And that is, what is your mojo, your magical superpower that you bring to this world? Kindness. Oh, I love that.
Kindness is my superpower. And honestly, even though I know I said I was a bad kid in the beginning, but trust me, that's not who I was, who I am now. Like, I'm actually a sweetheart. Like, I really care about
Aw.
people. I want to help people. I want to make people the best versions of themselves. And that's why I decided to be a coach, because
Mm-hmm.
when I coach people, I feel like I'm bringing the best out of people. And I feel like, yes, like ADHD has superpowers, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you do, like whether it's resilience or creativity or what have you. But I think for me, kindness is my superpower.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I thought you were going to say creativity was your superpower, but I love it. I mean, it's probably why we get along so well, is because, compassion and heart is one of my core values.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm very attracted to people that are just very, very kind and heart
Yeah.
centered.
Yep. I'm a giver and I love it.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Nick, for being here today. I just really enjoyed our conversation, and yeah, I will continue to support you out on LinkedIn. And I just love you.
I love you too, Lori.
All
Much
right.
love.
All right. Thank you. That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to the On a Mission Mojo podcast. Ready to dive into more incredible stories of people on a mission? Next week, I'll return with a fresh episode to ignite your passion for creating a better world. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a glowing review, and spread the word to all your friends. Head over to onamissionbrands.com for more great episodes. Remember, the world needs your mojo, so go out there and let your brilliance shine.